Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. When caught by Mother Yashoda, Krishna became more and more afraid and admitted to being an offender. As she looked upon him, she saw that he was crying. His tears mixing with the black ointment around his eyes, and as he rubbed his eyes with his hands, he smeared the ointment all over his face. Mother Yashoda, catching her beautiful son by the hand, mildly began to chastise him. Purport. From these dealings between Mother Yashoda and Krishna, we can understand the exalted position of a pure devotee in loving service to the Lord. Yogis, Jnanis, Karmis, and Vedantists cannot even approach Krishna. They must remain very, very far away from him and try to enter his bodily effulgence. Although this also they are unable to do. So the yogis, the karmis, and the jnanis, they want to enter the bodily light of Krishna, but they're also unable to do that. Great demigods like Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva always worship the Lord by meditation and by service. Even the most powerful Yamaraj fears Krishna. Therefore, as we find in the history of Ajamil, Yamaraj instructed his followers not even to approach the devotees, but to speak of capturing them. In other words, Yamaraj also fears Krishna and Krishna's devotees. Yet this Krishna became so dependent on Mother Yashoda that when she simply showed Krishna the stick in her hand, Krishna admitted to being an offender and began to cry like an ordinary child. Mother Yashoda, of course, did not want to chastise her beloved child very much, and therefore she immediately threw her stick away and simply rebuked Krishna, saying, "Now I shall bind you, so that you cannot commit any further offensive activities. Nor for the time being can you play with your playmates." End of quote. This shows the position of a pure devotee in contrast with others, like Jnanis, yogis, and the followers of Vedic ritualistic ceremonies in regarding the transcendental nature of the absolute truth. Om Adinati Mirandasya Dhyananjana Shalavakaya Chakshur Unidhikanya Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, and my spiritual master is opening my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge, so I offer my respectful obeisances unto him and to all members of Sri Parampara. Krishna, I prayed for for the blessings of the assembled Vaishnavas so that I can speak what is true. I will try to speak just according to Shastra, and I ask that devotees can wait for comments or questions. So today is Mother's Day. I tried to look it up. I did look it up, but I'm not sure how accurate the information was. The origin of Mother's Day. Seems like many different cultures, they celebrate the mother figure. I remember hearing some kind of radio show about how it was easy for the Mexicans to take on the worship of Mary, like the mother of Jesus, because they had the corn mother. That could be complete speculation, though. I mean, we don't know that's true, but the point is that in many cultures, it's said to have come from the Romans and the Greeks. So, but the creation, it's like Day of Mothers. I think in England they have Day of Mothers, and then America kind of took it also, and they celebrate this day on the second Sunday of May. I'm sorry. So anyway, yeah, I was thinking that this is a good opportunity to speak on mothers, particularly their importance in society. And so, one thing you'll find with different Shastra, with different Vedic scriptures, like the Bhagavatam and also like in Manu Samhita, which are the laws for mankind, and also the Bible, it's another scripture I found this in the very beginning. There's a description of creation. So before you hear any stories or before you hear rules or whatever lessons, there's a description of the creation. So we find this in the first canto. We find it actually in the second and third canto also, but it's in the beginning of the Bhagavatam, this book that I'm reading. And then the reader is meant to work their way up to reading about the transcendental, intimate activities of the Lord. So the idea is that why do we find this description there? And somebody, they might say the real thing is the pastimes, it's the Leela of Krishna. And that is, in one sense, that is the greatest thing to hear about. The actual activities and the form, the qualities, and the associates of the Supreme Lord. That's very important information for the soul who has forgotten his relationship with Krishna. But to think that understanding the creation of the world isn't important, somebody must be either extremely elevated, because all they can think about is Krishna, which is not most of us, or they're very ignorant. And the reason is that because by understanding the purpose of creation of the world, then we can understand how we relate to the world, and ultimately how we relate to God. So, also Prabhupada said regarding the creation of it was called Srishti Leela, or in other words, the pastimes of creating the world, that a pure devotee doesn't reject even one drop. He wants to hear everything about Krishna, everything related to Krishna. And objectively speaking, everything is related to Krishna. So we can hear about the creation of the world and begin to develop love for Krishna. But it doesn't mean that anything in the world we hear about will bring about the same result if it's not in that right consciousness. So why we must understand the purpose is that it informs us how we relate to the world and how we relate to Krishna. And within the world, we see many different things. We see many different planets, we see many different living beings with different bodies. And according to the living beings, according to Shastra, right now I'm speaking according to the Vedic scriptures, so I'm not going all the way into epistemology and how we come to accept that. I try not to speak about that more than once a year because I think it's overkill, but I'm speaking from that platform, so at least try to accept it theoretically that this is true. So, of every living being in the world is invested with a particular dharma Krishna has given them. Everything. The dog. If you see many different creatures that have a tail that wags and that pants and that barks, then you can understand that is a dog, even though there's many different kind of dogs. There's a dharma, there's a particular dharma that animal has. And you can think of anything, the trees, the flowers, certain flowers, they come into season at a certain time, right? And every year they do the same thing. Well, now the weather is a little bit changing because of human beings interfering with nature. But in general, there's a dharma of every living being. But the human beings, they have to consciously maintain their dharma. In other words, it is invested, the power to do that is invested in them. But they have a choice whether they want to live it or not. That's a difference. With human life comes responsibility. With human life also comes a whole lot of other benefits too. In the Vedas it says, Tato Brahmajigyasa, that now that you have attained a human body, you should inquire about what is Brahman, what is spirit. Plavam sukalpam sulabam sudurlabam. The human life is compared to a boat. And it's a boat that can take you across the ocean of material nescience, bhava. But it is both sulabam and sudurlabam. Sulabam means that it is easily achieved. In other words, just by nature, just by living in the material world, eventually you will receive a human body. But it is sudurlabam. It is very rarely attained. What to speak of the number of beings in one species, just the number of species is incredible. According to the Shastra, there's 8,400,000 different species in the universe. And each of those species is each of those body types is being inhabited by a jiva, a soul, a spirit soul, who've been separated from Krishna. But due to the mercy of Krishna, nature is set up in such a way that the jiva will transmigrate to each body, slowly, learning their lessons, and being also given the opportunity to enjoy in the material world. But eventually they will automatically come to the human form of life. And at that point, they must inquire as to how to make an end to this. Because, okay, sometimes we find that being in the world is nice. But if we look closely at how other living beings live, the quality of life, it's severe. It is very severe. When we see New Talavana, well, New Talavana is a little bit special because it's a holy place. But still, in the holy places, there can be a lot of severity. If we look, we see the beautiful flowers and the trees, when we see the animals, but we see also the animals are fearing all the time, afraid what's going on, some predator, like these cats, the cats come around, but when they see you, they always stay a little distance, checking you out. You're afraid maybe you're going to attack or something. Think about that. If you have to live day to day, that somebody's going to attack me, I have to find my food. So these are characteristics of living in the animal form of life, or less. But the human being, of course that is also there sometimes in human society, but they often have the opportunity, often we do like in America in general, I can say that we don't have to always be worried that somebody's going to attack me, and where do I get my food from? There's certain benefits afforded to the human being because it's a very special time where we have more time to inquire about spiritual knowledge. In the Shastra it said, that means that these things, eating, nidram, sleeping, bhayam, fearing or defending, and maitram, or mating, these are all the activities of animals. But if a human being only does these things, they are also an animal. So again, there's nothing inherently wrong with an animal. After all, Krishna created animals. In one sense, it's divine. But it's also somewhat unnatural for the jiva to enter into the animal body. I'm going to wear it now. I'll tell you why I take it off. Because I have, there are many senior devotees in the room who are my spiritual masters, godbrothers, and I don't generally want to wear a garland if they're not. That's why I do it. I don't think I'm not very humble, but I'm not supposed to. But I'm going to honor Krishna Prabhu's and Mataji's gift, and I thank you. So, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna mentions this dharma, the nature of human society. He says that these, okay, so I kind of skipped something here. Let me backtrack a little. The human being, what is the difference, the animal and the human? The human being consciously has to maintain their dharma. Otherwise, it can't be properly called a human being. And so, Krishna, as being very merciful, right? Actually, the Vedas are considered the mother, right? One of the mothers, many mothers. No, Chanakya Pandit, there's 7 mothers. But another mother, the Vedas, they give us knowledge. What to do in this world. It's mercy. It's complete mercy. We're in the world in ignorance. We're born in ignorance. So Krishna, he also gives a guidebook. How do we live in this world so that we can ultimately become free? Go back to the spiritual world where there's no fearing and defending and eating. Well, there's some actually enjoyable things in the spiritual world, but it has to be seen in the proper light. So Krishna gives a whole system, and that is a system that gives all human beings a way in which to live and to become purified and to advance, and even from the material perspective to serve the rest of society. That system is called varnashram. And varnashram dharma often has a bad rap with people because it goes against a lot of the things that people of today believe. But in the very verse Krishna mentions in the Bhagavad Gita, he says that Tasya kartaram apimam, even though I am the creator of the system, vidya kartaram avyayam, I am not the doer, being unchangeable. I have nothing to do with where you end up because of your good and bad acts. You get a body based on your own actions. But this system called varnashram, and again, I'm not going into super details because I'm trying to get to a point. We're trying to understand the philosophy behind the position and benediction and service of our good mothers. But varnashram dharma obligates human beings to serve within social roles. When modern people hear this, they become very disturbed. What the heck is this social role? What, you're going to outline how I'm supposed to live? Arrest him. They can't even imagine. Automatically people think it's bad because in the past, especially since the beginning of Kali Yuga, people with any kind of power, this is a general statement, but many such people, they exploit those under them. And the idea of being imprisoned in a role is anathema to people that they believe in freedom, that I can do whatever I want as long as I don't get too out of line. I can do whatever I want and be happy. So I'm trying to go through some principles. But in fact, actually, just by vocally approving of some of the aspects of our ashram, we could probably be punished, even in this country, just by approving, like saying that, yeah, I agree with that. But we can see practically that there's a certain amount of nurture required to bring out all the good qualities in human beings. There's a certain system that if people live in, then all the good things come out from those human beings to the best possible ability, to the best possible extent, I'm trying to say. We can see, for example, the military, there's a system. I didn't go in the military, but I know something about it. And, people go in with some knowledge, but then they get trained. And they some basic things they have to understand: authority, regularity, cleanliness. There's some basic things that are enforced upon the human beings, and it brings out the best of qualities. And when those qualities are surfaced, then things can function smoothly and properly, and society can progress. Now, of course, without Krishna, the thing doesn't work. Right? I was just talking to Bhakta Steve yesterday about these communist revolutionaries in Latin America, like Che Guevara and Fidel Castro. And like Che, for example, he was a welfare worker, you could say. He was very sacrificing. He practically gave his life. He did give his life, you could say. They killed him, They tortured him and they killed him because he was trying to liberate the oppressed working class people. But without Krishna in the center, every attempt we make, it will just be temporary. It may be good, but it will be temporary at best. So the point I was trying to make is that It's not that all of these social construct, all the plans that people make, even according to Shastra, will end in spiritual results if Krishna is not involved in the formula. That's the point I'm trying to make. So nowadays, we see that children, if they come from broken homes, generally, they have more problems than children that don't come from broken homes. They have more psychological, social, or whatever problems because of there's something out of place. So one can say this is antiquated. It's irrelevant to today, or maybe that people even believe these kind of things are a speculation. But in general, it's a generalization. But most children, if they come from a broken home, they will have more problems. It's just statistically true. If, however, there's a mother at home, father, whatever, you could say they have a better chance. Now, of course, even if a person is brought up with the best of parenting, they still are jiva, they still have free will, and they can be unpredictable. They can do things that aren't good for them or whatever. But in general, it's a fact. If there's a mother there for the child, they're going to have a better chance at, we could say, leading a saner, healthier life. Like that. But what is inherently good or bad? People today, they're ascribing. They themselves are making up. They're ascribing value to things that they don't actually know. They're saying, no, the way I do things is good or bad. Because I have more freedom, or I don't have more, or whatever. Anything you can think of, they can come up with. But we can see that there's a lack. I mean, even in our movement, so many people come. Why do they come? They don't know sometimes, by the time they reach adulthood, what am I doing with my life, you know? So maybe I was one of those kind of people. I don't know what I'm doing. Of course, I had a good mother and father, I feel. But the point is that it's not something we don't see. And it's also not necessarily even the parents' fault, like I said. But it's definitely a symptom of the times. So this whole system of varnashram gives everybody service opportunity to actually be all you can be, to actually do the best thing for all humanity. Nowadays, you know, people like I'm not saying this to criticize my own parents. They were both working full time. So when I come home, there's a babysitter. But that's not actually responsible, because you're actually getting to know somebody that doesn't have much to do with you. I mean, they didn't raise me, they didn't breastfeed me, they didn't bring me up to whatever age I was. But they're getting some money, you know, and then watching nonsense on the television, feeding microwave dinners or whatever. What about the fact that if the mother cooks for the children themselves, all the love goes into the food? This is not just a Hindu superstition. All over the world, people used to have this understanding up until recently. There's a consciousness that goes into cooking. But now, so many people, they don't even know how to make bread. I was traveling in the United States this winter, and one of my sisters was like shocked that I was making bread. You know, it was like, I've never seen this before. People just buy it. Bread comes from the store, it comes from a factory, you know, a machine rolls it up and fries it or bakes it or whatever. But this is like such a simple thing. But cooking, just another, we take it for granted, but it's another thing that it's like disappearing practically. People just buy dinner. I'll just buy dinner made by somebody I don't know what they're doing, and I'll take their consciousness in. I'll work so hard to become Krishna conscious, and in a moment, I'll eat their material desires by eating the food they made. But if we have mothers that are cooking for their children, then automatically all those good qualities, all the affection goes into the cooking of the child. These are just some examples. Again, sometimes also people may be forced into a situation you can't even afford, you know, the way that things are at this time, you know, in where we are in the age of Kali, at this point in time. Things may be very difficult. But my point is that there is an ideal, and that especially people who have been gifted with the intelligence to take this up, they should consider how we can live this kind of lifestyle. In what situation can we live a lifestyle that everything has the greatest possible outcome? So this is called varnashram. And the good thing, I will say, is that there's actually a prototype. There is a template for how society should how it should function by looking at how it exists in the spiritual world. all of the relationships that we have, well, or should have, most of the relationships we have, they have a original prototype with Krishna. Krishna has pets. Not exactly like people have dogs, but they all have a service. He has cows, and he actually does have 2 dogs, apparently. And he has, there's also goats. I read in Krishna book. He has goats and buffalo, also he herds. But the main thing is the cows. But he has pets and he has friends, like, for lack of better words, buddies, you know, close friends of equal age. And he has lovers, and yes, he even has parents. And of all the parents, I mean, when I say all the parents, there's many uncles and aunts in Krishna's family. Practically, there's unlimited uncles and aunts in Krishna's family. But there is one mother, Mother Yashoda. So we can see from the example of Krishna himself how this thing should manifest in this world. The only difference is that in that world, the devotees or the associates of Krishna, they're not performing service to become purified. They're just doing it out of love. They simply love Krishna. They don't, Mother Yashoda and all of the residents of the highest part of the spiritual world, they cannot imagine that Krishna is God. Sometimes they get a glimpse, but then they might think, maybe Krishna's haunted by a ghost right now or something, and I'm having a vision, you know, or maybe he's a demigod. I don't know, but it doesn't matter. He's our little boy. So that's the way, and this is super exalted. That's why in the beginning I said that either somebody, they don't want to hear the creation of the world because they're extremely elevated, or they're just ignorant of how important it is. But all of this is related to Krishna, how we live, how society runs, everything. And it's based on this template that exists in the spiritual world. So in the purport, Srila Prabhupada speaks about the eligibility required to enter those relationships with Krishna. He says that the yogis, the jnanis, and the karmis, they cannot understand Krishna. They can't approach Krishna. There's a verse in Brahma Samhita that says the yogis, after millions of years of traveling, they're drilling the respiration by performing breath control, etc. And they're traveling at the speed of mind. They can't reach the tips of the toenails of Krishna. In other words, they can't understand anything about Krishna because they're trying to do it on their own strength. But there is a certain unique eligibility required. And that is that you have to surrender. You have to give up trying to do things for yourself. That's the one thing that all these other people have in common. I mean, when I say that, non-devotees, karmis, jnanis, yogis. The karmis are just trying to enjoy the world, pretty simply. And the jnanis, they understand that the world is not a place of happiness, but they don't want anything to do with Krishna. They would rather destroy their identity in Brahman, in Brahmalin, being merged into Brahman. And the yogis, they are interested in getting some mystical powers. In other words, they get powers that we can't, I mean, if we've seen some of it, then it's impressive. But most people, they don't even believe these things exist. To fly in the sky, or to walk on water, to shrink, to disappear. The British actually reported these things, like when they first, and some other people, I think too, the Greeks, whoever was trying to invade India some centuries ago, then they saw that certain people had actual mystic cities, like, I can't remember who, maybe it was Alexander the Great, but it was some invader, some Western invader that came, and all of the swords that the invaders were holding were dropped by the soldiers because they became so hot. They were offending some yogi, and the yogi just burned all their hands because they were just invading, you know, the peaceful, his ashram or his territory or something. And so they recorded this, and the British also, they were trying, there was one Baba, they're called Baba, they don't wear anything, and he was a yogi, so this is recorded in like the British, I don't know what you call it, legal records, that they had arrested him multiple times, and he kept escaping. They couldn't figure out how is he escaping. He would shrink, and he would exit the door, right? They would put him in prison because he, you know, it's, what is that called? Public, I don't know, obscenity or something. You know, you're not dressed properly. So they arrested him, and I think after twice he escaped because he just disappeared. Then they stopped trying to arrest him. So these things actually existed, but people, who want these powers, they want to be special by manipulating material energy, they don't become happy, and they don't get Krishna. They cannot understand Krishna. So this is the thing that we have to understand, is that first of all, even in this world, we're meant for service. And by that service, we will become happy. It's natural. People that have everything, we often see this. People that have everything, I mean, when they say everything, I don't mean they have Krishna, but they have all the material things they want, you know. What do they do? Often, if they're pious, then they start doing welfare. They realize, yeah, this is not making me happy. I should give, you know. So even on the material platform, we find that we're happy when we're serving. But to be able to have that kind of relationship with Krishna requires a selflessness. And Prabhupada compared this selflessness to the selflessness of the mother. He said that it's closest, in this world, the motherly love in this world is the closest thing to spiritual love. Because it's practically completely selfless. I heard a story from another devotee. He had a friend, he boiled seafood alive. You know, I mean, that's what they do in the South. They just throw crawfish in the boiling water. And they were making eel. You know, eel is like this long fish, scary fish, and people eat it for some reason. And the eel put her belly, kept like putting the belly above the water, boiling water, and just kept as long as it could, just would keep the belly above the boiling water. And then they were, what is that? What is it doing? Eventually they realized there were the babies inside the eel, the body of the eel. Just see that. Somebody will go through hell just to keep the baby alive. So it's the right idea. But the thing is that the only person who we have a truly eternal relationship, well, we could say the spiritual master, but Krishna. And so everything has to be directed in the right way. But by practicing the system, then we get a glimpse. And both things can go on and should go on simultaneously. Like Prabhupada spoke about Dharma in the first canto. I don't remember which, I don't remember which chapter, but he said that there's two Dharmas. One is for the liberated, one is for the non-liberated. And so this Varnashram Dharma is for those who are not liberated. I'm in that category. I think most of us are. So it is something we have to accept, not by blind faith, but by some realization that this is Krishna's system. And that it is not an end in itself. The end is to have somebody like Krishna as your son. But still, the thing exists because it's good. It is just plain good for everyone. So I know I didn't get into, I tried to avoid anything highly controversial, but those are some thoughts on motherhood. I'll stop if there are any questions or comments. No, thank you very much.
Yeah, Prabhu, excellent class. Can you talk just a little bit about when Arjuna was making excuses not to fight during the Bhagavad Gita conversation?
Yeah.
What was Arjuna's argument regarding mothers and family and women of not to fight? And how did that correlate to the importance of motherhood?
Yeah. So he said that I don't know the Sanskrit, but he talks about the Kula Striya, that the women of the family will become degraded if they are without their protector, without their husbands. So that was one of the arguments. It's a moral argument. It's a good argument he gave against not engaging in warfare, unless it was absolutely necessary. And the idea is that we can't say it's all the women. It's only based on the women that society will retain its purity, because actually everybody is part of society. But the point is, there's an emphasis there because it is an essential link. The chastity of women is an essential link in keeping a society healthy. So if women are not chaste, then they will become, their consciousness will become degraded, then there will be Varna Sankara. Varna Sankara means unwanted population. That means people, they're born with not very good qualities, and then they create also not very good children, and then it continues like that. To maintain something is difficult. But to reform something after it's already become degraded is extremely difficult. So if whatever little culture we have as Vaishnavas or whoever we are, whatever faith, whatever culture we belong to, whatever little culture we have, if we maintain it, that itself is a great service. So Arjuna was speaking from the point of maintaining the chastity of women, for maintaining the sanctity of the culture. Is that
That's perfect.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, I wanted to just say I have this book. I'm distributing these. I just do it on my own. And I just try to get enough for the printing. They're $15. It's called Mothers and Masters. It's written by His Holiness Bhakti Vikash Swami. It's approved by the GBC, this kind GBC. It's very helpful. So I have copies if you want. Just give a donation, $15. And he also has a DVD with over, I think over 100 lectures, 145 lectures, something like that. So.
One quick question.
Yes, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
The Varnashram system is Krishna's system for getting us out of the material world, if we so desire.
Yeah.
Is it a necessary step?
Yes, absolutely. Actually, there's different verses you can quote in Shastra. You can, for example, what's maybe, I don't know if it's often quoted to argue against Varnashram, but Lord Chaitanya, he spoke about Varnashram as external, and yet he followed it. All of the acharyas, they promoted Varnashram, and they wanted their disciples. Bhaktivinoda Thakur said that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur appeared to spread the teachings of the holy name and to establish Varnashram. Prabhupada, at the end of his manifest presence, he said, "This is 50% of my work." I think that for us to think that it is impossible, it's simply neglecting the order of the spiritual master. You've given us an order. We have to find out how to establish it. It is, it's like you try to change the tide. Look how much Prabhupada did, and then he said, that was only half of my work. And now we're left I consider myself incompetent spiritualist, try to do something like that. But at least we can, as a team of aspiring devotees, attempt to fulfill his desire. And so we shouldn't think that it's irrelevant, it's impossible, it has nothing to do. No, it's Krishna's system. And our Acharya said that even still, at this point in time, it's something that should be established. I can see in my practical life and the life of my god siblings how the little bit of Varnashram elements they've incorporated into their life have helped them. For example, marriage. We live in a culture where free sex is fine. Like, what's the big deal? Except maybe when you come into a religious community, then people think, yeah, that's bad. But if you're brought up a certain way, then it's very easy to go back into your old habits, But if you marry, if you make a vow, no. From now on, I'm loyal, or I'm chaste, whatever. That'll help you. It'll help you so much. I mean, Prabhupada said if we don't keep our vows, we're not even human. He said only animals will break their vows. Just think. So we see so many devotees that can't keep vows. How can we say that Varnashram is irrelevant? It's not even, it's practically just, it's just devotees are just trying to maintain it, But if there are communities where devotees can actually live the natural lifestyle and Varnashram can exist, then we will be able to see the benefit of it to a very large extent. Sometimes this argument is given. Varnashram already exists everywhere. Yes, that's true, but not Varnashram Dharma. Varnashram, you see the Varnas, and you see something like the ashramas existing. In society, you see these different orders of people, laborers, merchants, administrative people, teachers, intellectuals, and priests. And we see students, householders, and then retired people, but it's not Dharma if they're not actually going according to the knowledge given by a higher authority. So yes, Varnashram exists everywhere in one sense, but not Varnashram Dharma. So it's very important. And the mother, again, I hope I didn't get so far off the point, but it's so essential that it can make or break the goodness of somebody's life, just how good the mother is. So, yeah. Maybe that was a long-winded answer to a short question.
appreciate it.
Okay.
Yes, I just wanted to mention, because you brought up the topic of Varnashram, that next month Bhakti Raghava Swami is going to be here. Do you remember, Astika or Vedanta, with the exact dates from the
7th or 8th?
7th or 8th to the 15th? And he's actually coming with the purpose of spending time here because he's writing his dissertation on intentional communities, and I'm sure with the focus on Varnashram because that's kind of his thing. So it's the 7th or 8th to the 15th, Bhakti Raghava Swami next month.
Okay. Shri Prabhupada ki jai, Shri Bhagavatam ki jai.